Carol Quigley says, there does exist and has existed for a generation an international Anglophile network which operates to some extent in the way that the radical right believes the Communists act. In fact, this network, which we may identify as the roundtable groups, has no aversion to cooperating with the Communists or any group, and frequently does so. I know of the operations of this network because I've studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years in the early 1960s to examine its papers and secret records. And he also states in that book that he has no aversion to their ends, this group of conspirators, but he thinks it should be known more publicly what they're pushed for, what the things that the globalists and the corporatists want. And one thing, like in recent history, like I said, you can see how it's littered with these fascist and communist governments, but it seems like they seem to prefer, the elite and the Illuminati seem to prefer this form of phony communism, and we have the Bolsheviks and Stalin, and we have the Nazis, National Socialism, then we have the Communist Chinese, Communist Cuba, which actually I was surprised. There was some U.S., it looks like we do have some evidence of U.S. backing of that one. I haven't even heard that one from a lot of people, but Ralph Epperson talks about Cuba. Amazingly, yeah, there is some, that we did originally support Castro, but then he came out too strongly in support of communism, so then we kind of had to okay, we got to back off. We can't make it too obvious we like this guy. We have they support communism because they sell it to the masses as this wonderful new utopia of the downtrodden, enslaved working class. But we all know that communism for the elite is simply just a way for them, to control wealth and money even more so than they already do. It's just to go a little bit into current events. I won't hit too much on this, but they're talking about quantitative easing or whatever, the Federal Reserve, and basically they're going to pump $600 billion, I think, into the money supply, and this down to the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke. So essentially, one guy is going to put that much money into our system. So they already have a tyrannical control of our financial system, and actually, I plan on doing a show on that lately. I have a slightly different take on the whole, quote, economic crisis. I'll just tell you the gist of it now. I think basically what a lot of the people in the conspiracy movement and the truth movement and the people like Ron Paul who really believe in free market economics, Austrian economics, they're always saying that there's coming collapse, death of the dollar. They've been saying that for a long time. And actually, if you listen to Bill Cooper, he was saying the same thing in the early 90s. And it's not that I'm saying they're necessarily wrong. Because I think but the way they're looking at it is they're basing their ideas on the ideas. They're looking at it from the economic principles that we probably should have. The economy probably should have totally collapsed right now. But I think because they're looking at it from that side, and because they know how the economy works with inflation and deflation and just printing money and just all this craziness with the Federal Reserve and stuff. So they're saying any day now it should collapse. But I think what it is, and I am by no means an expert on the economy, but I just think we're underestimating the control they have over the economy. Basically, the economy goes where they want it to go. And if they want it to be a boom, they could just, they could start a boom. If they want a depression, they can, an all-out Great Depression, serious collapse, they can do that. If they just want a slow, dwindling recession where it's just kind of more gradual, going downhill, they can do that. Anyways, but yeah, that's a topic for a whole other show. Slightly different take on the thing, because the point is they've been saying, people in the conspiracy movement have been saying the economy is going to collapse for a long time now. And I'm not saying they're necessarily wrong. There's a lot of signs that the economy is going downhill, but I'm just saying I think we underestimate the Illuminati and the New World Order puppets have over the economy. So that's my point on that. Going further into the conspiratorial view of history, though, just actually one more thing on the whole thing with controlling the nation's money. There's that famous quote from the Rothschild, give me control of a nation's money supply and I care not who makes its laws. So, it is an essential part of the conspiracy, but So yeah, and one thing that is just so amazing when you really dig into the conspiratorial view of history is we have very solid evidence of the conspirators funding violent revolutions, putting dictators into power, causing depressions. You know, they rig the financial markets. I mean, the bailout is a very recent example of that. We know, you know, they basically, you know, they said, you give us a bunch of money or there's going to be a mass depression. And they all had record bonuses, and it was just a huge scam. So this stuff is not as hidden as you would think. But I think there's two parts to it. You know, you have Jeffrey Grubb saying that they're trying to show themselves, and I do agree with that. But I also think they just know nothing. They can get away with it. I mean, I think they just know, you know, why not loot the people if no one's going to say anything? Why not, you know, show ourselves and not even keep it that hidden that we funded the Bolsheviks? You know, I'm going to get into that. They funded the Bolshevik Revolution that overthrew the czars in Russia. That started one of the most brutal regimes, you know, of communism and just massive death in the early 20th century. Think about that. That's what these people do. I mean, their decisions and who they fund and support. That's what a lot of it is financial support. You know, it's not, you know, like you're not going to see, for the most part, but I mean, sometimes they praise it. You're not going to see some big international banker come out and you know, back then and say, I love communists, I love, you know, I love Stalin, we need a, you know, they're not going to openly say it, but what they do is they just, behind the scenes, they just give them, you know, $500 million or, you know, whatever it was back then that they gave to Lenin. And, you know, Lenin was in exile, and there's records of these bankers funding the communists. It's absolutely insane. Bankers in America, mind you. And like I said, and there is, I mean, some of this is very much not conspiracy theory. Some of this is very, very provable. Let me see, what's the next point I can get into as far as the conspiratorial view of history? One thing I think is important to note. So, you know, if the Illuminati is literally funding and starting revolutions, which we can point to, especially with the French Revolution, okay, that's one of the, to many people, that is very key in looking at the Illuminati and how they work. What's with all these people today, you know, even in the quote patriot movement saying that, you know, they're talking about revolution. And I mean, man, it is such a basic thing in history. A lot of times when there is a revolution, what the people end up getting after the revolution is far worse. And I think that's because of these secret societies and the, you know, the shadow government. You know, they tear down one government and put up put up someone like Stalin, and it's absolutely hellish for the people. So, I mean, when people start talking about revolution, it's like, are you sure about that? You know, I don't know, at this point, I don't know if that's our best option. And, I don't know, people can say, oh, you're just saying that because you're copying out. No, I'm saying that because when you look at history, I can show you this with evidence. They control the revolutions, people. It's absolutely insane. Yeah, and actually, here's a quote. This guy named Oswald Spengler, he's a historian of the 20th century, and he said, this is his quote, "There is no proletarian, not even a communist movement, that has not operated in the interests of money, in the direction indicated by money, and for the time being permitted by money, and that without the idealists among its leaders having the slightest suspicion of the fact." So what is he saying? That goes back to my point of the communists, you know, saying, oh, this is a movement for the people, by the people. This is to show those evil capitalist pigs, you know, this workers' paradise. It's saying that is just a complete load of BS. That it is totally funded by the bankers and the capitalists. And Karl Marx was involved in this exchange. He was. We have evidence of him, you know, clearly not being against capitalism when it was handy to him. So, communism and socialism. People that support that I think they're just confused because if you know history, I don't see how you could really support it. I mean, it's funded by people who you would think would be afraid of communism. You know, these very rich bankers and capitalists, but they know in reality all it does is just gives more, you know, power to the insiders, to the, you know, the shadow government, the people pulling the strings of the politicians, and just gives them even more control of the wealth. So, yeah, actually, I'm going to go a bit more into the Bolshevik Revolution right now because that is absolutely immense to understand. And this is, a lot of these quotes are from Larry Abraham. He was the co-author of None Dare Call It Conspiracy. I guess there was a actually don't own this book. I do own None Dare Call It Conspiracy, but the next book was called Call It Conspiracy. And yeah, it says, and his name's Larry Abraham, and Larry Abraham asserts that the quote, the conspiracy has been planning the war, World War I, for over 2 decades. The assassination of Austrian Archduke was merely an incident, providing an excuse for starting a chain reaction. And then he says, yeah, but we know now that even that, quote, incident was planned as well. The things that always spark these wars have very, very suspicious beginnings. So World War I was a brutal war. It may not have had the death toll quite. I don't know the numbers, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, it wasn't as high as World War II. But, man, World War I is, if you know, like, the mustard gas and how absolutely hellish that war was in trench warfare. So, like I said, it may not have had the death count, but the utter brutality of that war. They banned a lot of those gases, you know, these war, you know, they make these laws for war, which is a little ironic. But so, and what he was talking about, if you don't know your history, just to give you a brief just to give you a brief idea, many historians see the event that really triggered World War I as the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke of Austria. And it's very strange. He was assassinated by this shadowy, weird kind of secret society group called the Black Hand. And I mean, I don't know. I need to research further about the Black Hand, but yeah, it is definitely starting to show the signs of. Well, I mean, clearly, just listen to that name, and then I actually saw a picture of their flag. You know, it just had all this symbolism on it. So they literally trigger wars. Obviously, a recent one. And that's why I'm telling you this all relates to this day. You know, you look at 9/11, and I think most of you are listening. We're probably on the same page when we say 9/11 was an inside job. It's just so. I still, the fact that people can't see that is just utterly amazing to me. I mean, yeah. So we know 9/11 was an inside job. So, and it's not like that was the first time they've used something like that. So, you know, it's literally. They have their hands dirty in all of the things that really matter in history. But let me read some more points about this. The Bolshevik Revolution happened not because of the downtrodden masses rising up against exploiting bosses that the communists perpetuate. Let me start over. The Bolshevik Revolution happened not because of the downtrodden masses rising up against exploiting bosses as the communists perpetuate the big lie, but because very powerful men in Europe and the United States sent Lenin and Switzerland and Trotsky to New York, to Russia, to organize it. Yeah, that's correct, people. You heard that right. These people, Max Warburg was specifically one of them, but yeah, we actually funded them. Let me just go further into this. Lenin was sent across Europe at war on the famous, quote, Still train. With Lenin, took some 5 to 6 million in gold. The whole thing was arranged by the German High Command and Max Warburg through another very wealthy and lifelong socialist by the name of Alexander Helpend, alias Parvus. When Trotsky left New York with an American passport and his entourage of 275 revolutionaries. So he came to New York. They left this part out, but I read this somewhere else. He came to New York as an exile with very little money, and then he leaves with 5 to 6 million in gold. You think he doesn't have some connections with the Illuminati? And then Jacob Schiff, senior partner in Cohn, Loeb & Co., a father-in-law of Max Warburg's brother Felix, also helped finance Leon Trotsky. According to the New York Journal American of February 3rd, 1949, quote, today it is estimated by Jacob's grandson, Jacob Schiff, that the old man sank about $20 million for the final triumph of Bolshevism in Russia. That's coming from the New York Journal American of, I've never even heard of that publication, but the New York Journal, and then American, I guess. Anyways, yeah, it has all this, source and stuff. So this person, spouting crazy conspiracies. This is all very well. It's out there for people to see, basically, if they want to find out about it. But it's pretty crazy to know all this. And someone says, I don't think the Zapatistas are a controlled movement. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look into them specifically. But let me go a little bit further into this, because this is very interesting. Okay, yeah. So a individual named Arsen de Golovich, an important white Russian general, wrote in his book Tsarism and the Revolution, quote, "The main purveyors of funds for the revolution." Just to go a little bit into current events, I won't hit too much on this, but they're talking about quantitative easing or whatever, the Federal Reserve, and basically they're going to pump 600 billion, I think, into the money supply, and this down to the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke. So essentially, one guy is going to put that much money into our system. So they already have a tyrannical control of our financial system. And actually, I plan on doing a show on that lately. I have a slightly different take on the whole, support of communism. So then we kind of had to okay, we got to back off. We can't make it too obvious we like this guy. Yeah, so we have they support communism because they sell it to the masses as this wonderful new utopia of the downtrodden, enslaved working class. But we all know that communism for the elite is simply just a way for them to control wealth and money even more so than they already do. I mean, Carol Quigley says, "There does exist and has existed for a generation an international Anglophile network which operates to some extent in the way that the radical right believes the Communists act. In fact, this network, which we may identify as the roundtable groups, has no aversion to cooperating with the Communists or any group, and frequently does so. I know of the operations of this network because I've studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years for the elite and the Illuminati seem to prefer this form of phony communism, and I mean, we have the Bolsheviks and Stalin, and we have the Nazis, National Socialism, then we have the Communist Chinese, Communist Cuba, which actually I was surprised. There was some U.S., it looks like we do have some evidence of U.S. backing of that one. I haven't even heard that one from a lot of people, but Ralph Epperson talks about Cuba. Amazingly, yeah, there is some, that we did originally support Castro, but then he came out too strongly in the early 1960s to examine its papers and secret records. And he also states in that book that he has no aversion to their ends, this group of conspirators, but he thinks it should be known more publicly what they're pushed for, what the things that the globalists and the corporatists want. And one thing, like in recent history, like I said, you can see how it's littered with these fascist and communist governments, but it seems like they seem to prefer